This is an SABC News presentation.
Goeienaand, welkom by Fokus. Ek is Lenet Francis. Voordat ons by vanaand se program uitkom, eers 'n belangrike aankondiging. Vanaf Sondag 7 Februarie is Fokus weer terug op SABC 2. Ja, jy het reg gehoor, ons skuif terug na SABC 2 om 6:30 net voor die Afrikaanse nuus. Maak gerus 'n aantekening daarvan. Vanaand te Fokus praat ons oor die vooruitsigte vir 2016. Wat kan Suid-Afrikaners in die komende jaar verwag? Maar voordat ons gaste aan die woord stel om hulle perspektiewe te deel, eers hierdie kort verslag deur Fokus-regisseur Jolien Rier oor van die gebeure van verlede jaar wat 2016 kan beïnvloed.
Die matriekuitslae van 2015 is die afgelope week bekend gemaak. Die slaagsyfer het gedaal tot 70,7%. Van die matrikulante wat geslaag het, gaan verder studeer, terwyl anders gaan werk soek. 2016 het nie goed begin vir die rand nie. Die Suid-Afrikaanse geldeenheid is steeds onder druk, wat weer druk plaas op brandstof en voedselpryse. Dit word vererger deur die voortsleepende droogte en die vreeslike hittegolf. Sommige jeugorganisasies dreig reeds om die feesmasvol veldtog van jaar voort te sit wanneer universiteite volgende maand heropen. Politieke partye het 'n besige paar maande wat voorlê om kiesers opnuut te probeer oortuig om vir hulle te stem tydens die munisipale verkiesing wat vroeg vanjaar gehou word.
Talle politieke en ekonomiese kenners het teen die einde van verlede jaar gewaarsku dat 2016 'n moeilike jaar gaan wees. Die jaar is 10 dae oud en die afgelope week was die rand steeds onder druk en het dit deur die vlak van R16 teenoor die Amerikaanse dollar gebreek. Dit het groot gevolge vir verbruikers met pryse wat kan styg. Die droogte en die hittegolf help ook nie. Ook op politieke vlak kan dit 'n onstuimige jaar wees. Die munisipale verkiesing vind vanjaar plaas en die betogings deur ontevrede Suid-Afrikaners kan vir jaar ook voortgesit word. Nou om te hoor wat Suid-Afrikaners kan verwag, praat ons nou met 'n politieke ekonoom en ondervoorsitter van die Instituut vir Internasionale Sake, Moletsi Mbeki, en met die adjunk-uitvoerende hoof van Agri SA, Christo van der Rede. In belang daarvan dat ons gaste mekaar kan verstaan, voer ons die gesprek in Engels. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time. Mr. Mbeki, with the backdrop of what happened last year and the expectations and the concerns for 2016, you said last year as well that you think South Africa is on the brink of a time bomb waiting to explode. You still hold that view, given the background that we've just sketched?
Yes, I think so. And I think the crisis we had over the shuffling of finance ministers and the consequences on the currency and the confidence in the government by investors and economic players domestically and internationally shows that South Africa has a huge number of problems. We are sitting with massive unemployment in this country. We have nearly 40% of the African population unemployed, 30% of the colored population unemployed. So these big groups in our country are living under enormous economic stress. And then, of course, on top of that, we are having the drought, which is going to lead to greater and greater prices, especially food prices. In an environment where we are having political uncertainty, this can really become explosive.
So the political uncertainty, do you think that is directly the cause for this situation with race and the tension that we feel in South Africa at the moment?
Well, I think the tension we feel in South Africa is primarily economic. It's the economic problems. The chatter on the social media is not the cause or even the consequence. It's a side issue. The real problem is that our economy is not performing. That's point number one. Point number two is that the government, which is supposed to provide leadership to the country, is itself confused. How can you have five finance ministers in 5 days? That's a sign of confusion.
Is dit wat aanleiding gee tot hierdie spanning?
Lynette, any country's economy operates like your personal household. You've got an income side and an expense side. What is happening on the income side in South Africa? You've got your taxpayers who must pay their taxes. You've got your companies who must pay their taxes. And what you see is a decrease in tax income to the fiscus. And that will lead to major problems because we need to fund almost 17 million people from welfare grants. We need to fund increases for our teachers. We need to fund SAL and all of these other South African Airways and all of the other state operations. If we do not have money, then we're going to run into serious trouble. On the expense side, we will have to prioritize. We've got a major drought, and we must make sure that we put food on the table. I always say people can live without electricity to a certain extent, and people can live without certain other things. But if there's no food in this country, then we're going to have serious, serious upheaval. Remember, South Africa is the only African country that can provide food for its own people and that can provide food for international export. So we need to treasure that. We need to nurture that. If we lose that capability, then we're going to run into serious trouble.
What has been the feedback from the farmers at Agri-SA? Are they sharing this depressing view of their own growth and providing for our country?
Remember, we have already had drought last year.
Yes.
So farmers is now the second round, and farmers, those who are trying to plant, if they lose a second round of planting, then they're in serious trouble. Most of our farmers are in serious debt. In other words, they own the bank's money. From Agri-SA side, we are trying to negotiate with the banks. We're interacting with government to help the farmers. Because remember, if farmers are struggling, the entire farming community, workers included, everyone are suffering. So it's very important that we assist our farmers in every way possible. And we have to put the politics on the sideline for now and focus on the real issue, that is food security.
Before we talk about leadership that you touched on, Moleitsi, let's quickly talk about a second transition that you also refer to with regard to where we're at in South Africa. What does that imply, quickly?
No. That's the ANC's program, the second transition. It's not my point of view. South Africa, you know, when we changed the politics of the country and democratized the politics of South Africa, we did not really change the economic structure of South Africa. South Africa is an old economy. This is what gets forgotten. We have an economy that goes back to the Dutch East India Company, which set up, for example, the agricultural systems of the Western Cape. So, and those agricultural systems are there. They may be minor slavery, but everything else is the same. So we have an old economy, and for example, our mining economy, it's an old economy. It started in the 1850s with Namaqualand, with copper mining in Namaqualand, which then went to Kimberley and to the Witwatersrand. So we have an old economy which hasn't been changed. It's still operating as it was established between the 17th and the 19th centuries. It has to be changed.
So that's some of the issues that we want to address. If we're talking about economic restructure and economic freedom, is that where we have to go back to? Ons het die gesprek net hierna voort, moenie weggaan nie. Ons is nou terug. Ons praat oor die vooruitsigte vir 2016 en ons sit nou ons gesprek voort met ons gaste, die politieke ekonoom Moleitsi Mbeki en die adjunkuitvoerende hoof van Agri-SA, Christo van der Rede. So before we went to break, we spoke about the changes in economic structures. So what we mean when we say economic freedom or liberation in our time, what does that imply?
Lynette, economic freedom doesn't fall from the sky like manna from heaven. We must realize that economic freedom, the roots of economic freedom lies in proper education systems. We must ensure that our learners are prepared for new economies. We live in an internet world. To what extent did we train our young people to go into a new environment where they need to utilize these new facilities to be productive. Secondly, we must understand that we need greater levels of entrepreneurship. Our municipalities have a big role to create conducive circumstances to encourage people to become entrepreneurs. If you look at the informal market systems, it works very well. But our government, our municipalities are not doing enough to protect and encourage people within the informal market structures. And we also do not support them to grow from that to a more formal economy. And thirdly, we must make sure that there are greater levels of economic organization. Economic freedom is a fallacy. It starts with economic organization. In other words, we must open up our economic structures for black, for colored, for Indian people. White people must sit around the table and say, what is in the best interest of our local economy? Sit, plan together, work together, and come up with innovative ideas. You cannot grow an economy without creative ideas. People in South Africa have a tendency to sit back, expect government to deliver the goods. If you go to your eastern countries, if you go to your western countries, you find people are at the forefront of economic organization and economic growth.
So what is going to be the challenge then for our not-so-new Minister Pravin Gordhan when he addresses and sets out his budget this year?
Well, Lynette, I think Pravin has got an uphill task in front of him. As Christo has pointed out, the revenues of the government are in trouble already, partly because of drought, but also partly because of the growing unemployment in the country, the low economic activity in the country, the low growth of the country. So he is faced with a huge number of problems at the same time, the government spending is going up. So how he's going to manage that, well, he claims to be a magician. So let's see how he does it. But I want to come back to the issue of economic freedom. You see, we in South Africa have a habit of taking notions from all over the world and then think that we make them our notions without really understanding what these...
Copy and paste.
Without understanding what their meaning is. Economic freedom is about capitalism. That is what economic freedom was about. If you go back to the English Revolution in the 17th century, they killed and they executed the King of England because he was running monopolies. They said they wanted freedom, and by economic freedom, they meant that every individual should be free to practice their trade, to practice their craft, instead of being forced to buy just from monopolies. That is what economic freedom is about. So economic freedom is about free capitalism. That's what it's about. In South Africa, it's used very loosely by Jacob Zuma, by Julius Malema, and when you ask them what do they mean by economic freedom, they think that it will make the worker into a capitalist. So we have a Minister of Land Reform who says he's going to take half of the land of the farmer and give it to the farm worker. He thinks that will give the farm worker economic freedom. It won't give the farm worker economic freedom. That's not what economic freedom is about.
Very complex issues. So let's talk about the municipal elections then, the expectations. How will this economic situation, crisis for many, impact on those choices that they make at the polls?
I think it will impact negatively, especially in municipal areas where there are very, very poor service delivery. I've been to an area called Saldanha Bay over the holidays, and it was just a pleasure to see how that municipality ensured that the town is clean every day, that the beaches are clean. They've created such an environment that every tourist wants to be in that area. For me, that is the type of municipality, that is the type of governance that I would want to elect into power. But then you go to other areas. There's no, people suffered. There's no water infrastructure is gone. The electricity infrastructure is gone, but people must pay the rates and taxes. And the big question that people ask, but if I pay for something, why don't you deliver the service? And municipal elections is everything about service delivery.
We saw this fees must fall protest last year, and also a protest about service delivery. Do you foresee that people will be apathetic with regard to the municipal elections, or will they see it as an opportunity to make change or create change?
Well, the vote actually in South Africa is very different from many countries in the sense that you have a huge participation in local government elections, in municipal elections. So I'm expecting that there will be as big a participation as traditionally there's been, and a message, I'm expecting the voters to send a very strong message to the government about service delivery, about all the issues that especially the poor people in this country are faced with. For example, Christo is talking about the maintenance at Saldanha Bay of the beaches and so on. Couple of months ago, I was in New Brighton, in Port Elizabeth. The townships are in a shocking condition, absolutely shocking condition, with dirt all over the place and so on and so forth. So there's been a huge deficiency at the local government level, the way in which, and then the corruption issue at local government is a very critical problem that the government has to clean up.
Daar is nog sake waaroor ons moes gesels, net hierna kom ons terug en dan praat ons oor die brood en botter kwessies wat jou en vir my raak. Moenie weggaan nie, ons is nou terug. Welkom terug by Fokus. Ons het reeds gehoor dat 2016 nie maklik gaan wees nie, maar wat kan Suid-Afrikaners doen om hulle eie lewens makliker te maak? Ons gaste is die politieke ekonoom Moletsi Mbeki en die adjunkuitvoerende hoof van Agri SA, Christo van der Rede. Kom ons praat oor die brood en botter kwessies, Christo. Want mense wil sê, ek moet skoolfonds betaal, daar's groot werkloosheid, ons het nie werkvooruitsigte nie, ons sukkel, as armoede, grootskaalse armoede, Moletsi het ook daarna verwys. So, what are the challenges and how are we going to address it? How do we give them hope?
Ja. Weet julle net, ek het ongelooflik geloof in die gewone mense van Suid-Afrika. Ek het net hierdie week gesien hoe elke mens daar buitekant, te midde al hierdie goed op Facebook en al hierdie rassistiese uitlatings, hoe die gewone mense hande vat. Daar's 'n groep boere in nood en daar's 'n groep Water Hydrate Project. Die boereverenigings, die verskillende provinsiale kantore, hoe almal inspring om die droogte op 'n manier te beredder. Hulle gee water, hulle gee voer. Ek het nou 'n versoek gekry dat ons klomp rys en 'n klomp ander goed vir plaaswerkers kan gaan gee. Dit is ongelooflik om te sien hoe die gewone mense. My geloof het al lankal opgehou in politici. Al wat ek sê, gewone mense daar buitekant, organiseer hulle self in burgerlike strukture, raak betrokke by jou georganiseerde besigheidsstrukture en op hierdie manier kan ons die ekonomie van 'n dorp aan die gang hou. Om terug te sit en te kla oor wat gebeur daar buitekant gaan nie veel help nie. Ons moet betrokke raak by verskillende aksies op plaaslike vlak.
How do we as South Africans mobilize and where does the hope lie for you, Moletsi?
Well, I think this is one of the most important strengths of South Africa. In a way, that is the only positive thing that came out of apartheid, is that it forced the people to mobilize to resist apartheid. So we have a highly more organized society and a very active society. We saw this with the students when they saw that the government and the universities were raising fees which were not affordable by their parents. They organized themselves and they forced the government to change direction. We saw the response of the markets, of the South African financial markets, with President Zuma playing games with the cabinet, and they reacted and showed what their displeasure with messing around with the economy. So this is really a fantastic asset that South Africa has. Absolutely. We have a very organized society. We have, for example, Christo's farmers are organized. The trade unions are organized. The workers are in trade unions. The religious community is organized. It's in churches. The South African Council of Churches is being revived now. So it's a huge strength that we have in this country. And we have to build on it and we have to strengthen it.
In which direction should we go? We saw last year a lot of people saying, particularly opposition parties, that there's the motion of no confidence in President Jacob Zuma. A lot have asked that he should resign. A lot very skeptical about where the direction which the country is going. What should we be consolidating? What should we be focusing on? Particularly if we want to see an upsurge in economic growth, in people having jobs.
Well, the opposition parties, they spend too much time on opposing the ANC. They should spend more time on coming up with solutions.
Exactly.
They are now they are planning to once more go and have a vote of no confidence in Parliament on Jacob Zuma, which they will lose because the ANC has 62%. Now, you know, as somebody said, that if you keep doing the same thing and expecting you are a lunatic. So the opposition parties have to come up with what is the alternative way of running the South African economy that will remove the poverty and the unemployment that we're faced with. Spending their time with votes of no confidence and in Jacob Zuma is wasting their energies.
But in addition to that, Lynette, I also want to see communities across racial boundaries starting to take hands. Yes, we're very diverse in terms of culture and language and things like that, and it will be there forever. But we should not allow those things to stand in our way. We face a severe crisis in South Africa. And if South Africa falls, remember, the entire SADC region will go up in flames. Because many Zimbabweans, many people from Lesotho, people from Mozambique, they come back to South Africa to come and work and to find work. So yes, we have a massive responsibility towards Africa. And as South Africans and fellow Africans, we need to take hands, for the moment, put our trivial issues aside, work together so that we, at the end of the day, save not only South Africa, but that we save Africa as well.
But Christo, can I add to this? The other thing is that the other African countries, the neighboring countries, have a responsibility to South Africa.
As well.
Look at Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is flooded, destroyed its own economy. And is flooding poor people into the South African economy. There has to be mutual responsibility and there has to be mutual cooperation. We cannot have neighboring countries destroying their economies so that the Robert Mugabes of this world stay in power, and then South Africa is expected to absorb the populations that become unemployed, that become impoverished and pauperized as a result of this political turmoil like we are seeing in Zimbabwe.
But it does seem to me that the both of you are saying we shouldn't just focus primarily on leadership in South Africa or political parties to give us direction, that we within ourselves need to reflect and cast our own way.
Every church, every mosque in South Africa, every school community, every civil society organization must organize themselves at local level, sit around the table and say what is in the best interest of this town.
Ongelukkig moet ons dit daar laat. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for both coming in this evening. Daarmee het ons aan die einde gekom van vanaand se program. Ons is volgende Sondag om 7 uur weer terug op ons pos hier op SABC 3. Maar onthou nou, vanaf 7 Februarie skuif ons terug na SABC 2 op Sondaande om 6:30. Ons verwelkom kykers se kommentaar, tweets en voorstelle. Skryf net 'n SMS met die woord Fokus, gevolg deur 'n kort boodskap en SMS dit na 34444. 'n SMS kos R2. Word gerus ook 'n lid van ons Fokus groep op Facebook. En volg ons ook op Twitter by Fokus ZA. Van my gaste hier in Johannesburg en die res van die Fokusspan tot volgende Sondag aand om 7 uur op SABC 3. Goeienaand.